Very much, Titi. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on wherever you're watching from all over the world. And you are welcome to the International Law Panel session of the Lex Lata Career Seminar. My name is Joel Olano, and I will be moderating this panel session. Please note that this panel lasts for 30 minutes. Yeah, and I have with me here two amazing guests who will be our panelists for today's session. Titi has introduced them, but I will go ahead to read their profiles. But before then, a few housekeeping rules. We will take questions from the audience, but at the end of the panel session, and it's going to last for 10 minutes, I beg your pardon, please ask them in the chat box. Secondly, please show your enthusiasm and your excitement so our speakers know that you're following. You can use the clap features Zoom has provided, or you could just respond in the comments. That said, please join me to welcome Mr. Toks Hussain and Mr. Tisungane Makato. Audience, you know what to do. Please respond in the comments. You're welcome, Toks. You're welcome, Tisu.
Thank
Great
you.
to have you here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. So I'll be reading their profiles respectively, starting with Tokumbo. Ade Tokumbo Toks Hussain is an international law consultant at the International Nuremberg Principles Academy. Toks was previously a legal intern in the Office of the President of the United Nations International Residual Mechanism for Criminal Tribunals, and now joins the Stanisic International Defense Team led by Wayne Jordash. Prior to working in the mechanism, he was assistant to counsel in the China Tribunal led by Sir Geoffrey Nice. Toks also serves as the head of the British Nigeria Law Forum Junior Lawyers Division. In his capacity, he hosted the popular webinar entitled International Justice and Africa, which featured prominent speakers from the International Court of Justice, the International Criminal Court, and others. Some of his notable awards include Professional Development Award, BPP University 2020, Rising Star Award, British Nigeria Forum, Best Defense Oralist, Association of Defense Counsel practicing before the International Courts and Tribunals in 2019. In 2020, Toks created the now popular show Law Talks with Toks. You are welcome, Toks. Great to have you here.
Thank you. Pleasure to
Great.
be here.
Great. So I will be reading Mr. Tisungane's bio. Tisungane, Tisu, is an associate at Volterra Theatre, a public international law firm in London, United Kingdom. He advises and represents sovereign states, corporate clients, and international organizations on a wide range of contentious and non-contentious public international law matters, investment protection, and risk. He has appeared before the International Court of Justice. He holds an LLB degree from the University of Malawi, an LLM, Energy Law and Policy, from the University of Dundee, and an LLM from the prestigious Harvard Law School. He is admitted to practice law as a legal practitioner in the High Court of Malawi. We also welcome Mr. Tisu. Great to have you here.
Much. Thank you.
Great. So we'll just go on to the panel session for today, and without further ado, we'll begin right away. So this question is to you, Toks. What are the career options within the field of international law? Is being a professor of law the peak of a career in international law, and how easy is it to switch between career paths within the field?
Well, firstly, thank you to everybody here for attending, and thank you very much, Lex Lata, for this generous invitation. I hope you can hear me well.
Loud and clear.
Great. Great question, the career options within international law. I think there are several options to consider. I'm just going to break them down as follows. So the first option is the court system. By that, I'm referring to the International Criminal Court, the International Court of Justice. You have ad hoc tribunals, for example, the UN mechanism where I work at the moment, Special Tribunal for Lebanon, etc. And within those organizations or within the court system, there are several roles where one can work in. So for example, you have the prosecution, you have defense, you have registry, or even the victims unit. And within the registry, that really is the branch of these organizations that run the diplomatic function. For example, if you were to work in the mechanism, for example, so you would be involved with UN correspondence and relations as such. So that's the court system. The next is international organizations. And within that, you have organizations such as the ICRC, which is the International Committee of the Red Cross. You have several NGOs you can work for which deal with international work. For example, there's Amnesty International. Then if you want to work within your local jurisdiction, you may consider a career within the military. And so that, for instance, could be being a legal advisor or being a lawyer, and you might advise on the law of war or humanitarian law. You could work in a law firm, for example, in which case you'll engage in advisory work or maybe defense work. And lastly, academia is very popular to consider. So research opportunities. You could also be a lecturer. In terms of the other part of your question, whether being a professor of law is something which you want to consider, I think that it's something which many professionals do in practice. Indeed, people work as practitioners and they go into lecturing as well, and it's something which you could do. It's not unusual at all. Just remind me, what's the last part of your question?
Yeah, I said, how easy is it to switch between career paths?
Between academia and
Yes.
being in practice?
Yes.
Well, people do it all the time, but I think you have to be advised and guided by the market. If there's a marketplace and there are job opportunities, you may wish to consider it. If not, then probably think very carefully exactly what you want to do. But in practice, people do it all the time. So I hope that assists with the first question.
Yes, thank you so much, Toks. So it's not unusual to switch between career paths in international law. You just have to be aware of the markets. Great, thank you so much, Toks. So the next question is to you, Tisu. For undergraduates, how important is it to identify an area of specialization early on? And how can a student deal with not having clarity as to the particular area he or she wants to work in? Then lastly, are there any dangers in specializing too early?
Well, I'm speaking from my own experience. I think that when you're a law student, that's the time for you to explore, the various branches and fields of law. So, I mean, for an undergraduate, I would encourage, that you explore, the various fields of law that are being offered at your university, so that you identify what you really like. And I think what many people have sort of experienced is that what you thought you liked when you were in university is not necessarily what you end up liking after university. So I generally would encourage undergraduates to explore constitutional law, torts, trusts, international law, and so on and so forth. And then if they have identified what they would like to do, the field of law that they would like to specialize in, and then probably they can take that up when immediately after they graduate, to see if that is something that they would really like to do. I remember when I was an undergraduate student at University of Malawi, I thought that I would end up being a corporate lawyer, and I wrote my LLB thesis on corporate law. But when I graduate, I sort of realized that corporate law is not what I really wanted to do. And then I practiced for a number of years, and then I proceeded to do my postgraduate education. So I mean that is those are my views. And with respect to specializing early, again, it's I would encourage undergraduates to have an open mind, because when you're a bit younger, just fresh from university, you you're still exploring. So you should not, fix your mind on a specific or particular field of law, because, our tests change with time, one. Two, there's also the market reality. If you are working in a smaller economy, a smaller country like Malawi, you're likely to be a generalist, pretty much doing everything. But in, bigger economies, you really have to specialize in, or to choose a specific field of law. So if you have chosen a certain specific field of law, but then it's not, probably there are no jobs in that field of law, that may not necessarily be a good position to be in. So just keep an open mind and explore as many fields of law as you like. And with time, you get to sort of know which field of law suits you.
Thank you, Tisu. So keep an open mind and explore. Toks, I could see you nodding your head. Do you have anything to add?
I agree entirely with everything that Tisu has said. When you are young in law school, you just start, you get excited about anything you study. But there's also a difference between practice and theory. So don't just get very excited about tort law and say, oh, I want to do tort, and that's it. Be very open, because your mind might change in a few years from now. So I entirely agree with everything Tisu has said. Very well put.
Thank you, Toks. So to you now, how can undergraduate law students prepare themselves for a career in public or private international law while still at university?
I think, to be honest, it's the same thing you do to prepare yourself for a career to be a lawyer anyway. You need to master the basics of law, the criminal law, tort, contract, public law. Of course, one thing I should say at this point is that certainly with international criminal law, it's a compromise between different systems, between common law, civil law. So if you have at least an appreciation of how common law works or how civil law works, that's good. You don't have to be an expert in terms of the substance of it, but at least be familiar with it. And one thing which is also perhaps evident, or maybe it's not so evident, is that international law, be it public international law, private international law, as much as it is very practical, it's also very academic. And most people who tend to go into these areas are people who are very intelligent and very bright. So make sure that if you want to achieve the best chances to practice in this field, do very well academically. Try and be the best. Because it's very competitive. That is the reality. In terms of other things that you could do from now, you should be very interested in international affairs, what's going on in the world. And you should also develop what's called commercial awareness. And if you're somebody who is interested in private international law, arbitration, I know other speakers are going to talk about these in due course, you should be following what's going on the news, in the legal world. Which merger has happened? What is the ramification for this company buying this company? Or what's the implication of the UN sanction on this country, etc.? So be following these things right from now. And also, it's very important to read around these subjects. If you want to go into public international law, what does it actually mean? Find out about it. I think you should have all received a PowerPoint presentation I prepared in advance and sent to everybody. So that just has some basics and some of the things you may wish to know. So read about these subject areas. You don't have to be an expert at this point in time, but at least have an idea of what people are actually involved in and what it involves. And I think the last part of how you could prepare yourself is to network from now. It's never too early to network with professionals. Let me give a little word warning, though, when it comes to networking. You have to be very sensible when you approach practitioners, because these are people who are very busy, and two, you need to have what I consider to be a value proposition. And by that, I mean, what can you do for them? How can you be of service to them as well? Remember, it's a two-way street. If you reach somebody, let's say on LinkedIn, and you say, hey, I've always wanted to do international law. Can you help me out? It's like, fine, that's nice. But at the same time too, what do I get from this exchange? And one practical way you could consider, for example, is to offer research assistance to somebody in their work. Of course, that doesn't mean you're going to be paid, but to say, hey, I'm very interested in public international law. In particular, I'm interested in international criminal law. In other words, I'm asking you to be specific in your approach, exactly what you need. I've developed this interest, and I'm willing to offer some research assistance if you think this is something which might be helpful to you in terms of any other assistance I can provide. Now, as a practitioner, I'm more inclined to listen to what that person has to say rather than the other 9 people who contacted me last week to just say they're interested, help me, give me a job. So be very sensible in how you network. So those are some of the tips which I would offer from now, which you can develop. And lastly, just follow webinars and presentations, things like this event, for example. They're very helpful just to develop your knowledge, your interest, your expertise. There are also courses, short courses you could do from now to develop an understanding. So go ahead and do those courses as well.
Thank you, Toks. That was very, very detailed. I mean, I can't begin to list them all, but you said a lot. So this is just an agenda. What kind of skills do you think are needed for a successful international practitioner, and what certifications, if any, can law students get to prepare themselves for practice?
Is this for me?
Yes, this is for
okay.
you.
Right. Okay, great. Again, skills needed, it's the skill of any lawyer. It's really that simple. So you want to make sure that your drafting skills are excellent. So I didn't say writing skills, pay attention. I said drafting skills, because it's very easy to write a story or write a Facebook post, whereas legal drafting, on the other hand, is an entirely different skill. And if you work in the UN system, it has a different style of drafting as well. So you have to be very flexible in terms of how you draft legal documents. So make sure you get that, you hone those skills if you don't have them already. In terms of actually practicing, one thing which gets overlooked, I think, is the fact that you should be a lawyer in the first place, if you're going to practice. So, I've trained in England. Most people, in the international field, they are qualified in their home jurisdiction. So make sure that you shouldn't get so caught up in this idea of international law that you forget to actually do the first thing first and try and qualify within your home jurisdiction in the first place. In terms of certifications you mentioned, I think a master's degree in international law is important as a minimum. Now, the field is very competitive, and you'd be amazed to know that there are many people who have at least one master's degree in international law. The person that I worked with in the president's office last year, he was one of the most brilliant people I'd ever met, and he's on his 3rd master's degree now.
Wow.
So really, when you were talking about masters, I'd say that at least one, particularly if you don't have as much work experience as you ought to have. That being said, it's very important that you have work experience, which you've developed perhaps from a law firm. Again, you want to develop your analytical skills, your reasoning skills, your problem-solving skills as well. You should be a competent legal researcher, be able to navigate different sources, be able to use the internet. I say that as a joke, but in reality, yes, you do need the internet to navigate things, because you're not going to be in a library all day. or perhaps you might be, but if you want to be very efficient, you have to learn how to navigate different legal sources to do that. Also, you should have an excellent command of language. And by language, I mean English and or French. Now, I suspect I might be asked about languages in due course. I'm not going to answer too much about that now. But last point is diplomacy. What do I mean by that? Well, you're an international sphere. You're going to deal with quite important people in the international sphere. So you have to be diplomatic and perhaps not be somebody who is very rash, because that can have different consequences, which could be very negative. So you have to think about that, and just be very cautious of that. Let me finally say a little bit of a PR project I'm doing next week. I'm going to host a seminar on professional etiquette, and I'm very happy to send the details to your center if anybody's interested. Just
That would be great.
to help
Thank
you
you.
with other skills to develop as well in the legal field. Anyway, I hope that helps.
Yes, it did. Thank you so much, Toks. Tisu, so would you advise students who are interested in pursuing LLMs, like Toks has said, to do this immediately after law school, or do it after a few years in practice? So after law school, do they go straight to do their masters, or do they wait to practice in their home country before going for a master's?
Again, speaking from a personal experience, when you do your masters after gaining a bit of work experience, it helps to it gives you a perspective that someone who does not have work experience may not necessarily have. So, and again, as I said earlier, by that time, if you have worked for a number of years, a few years, you would have identified what really works for you, the type of field that you are interested in. So when you go for your master's, you already know what you want to do, and you will be doing a master's, obviously, in a field that you want to specialize in. And then because of the experience, the work experience, that gives you a perspective. Unlike someone who has not gained any experience at all, they're just fresh from university. Probably this is why some universities, especially in the US, as an entry requirement, they want you to have at least 2 years experience, because they believe that at that level, if you have at least 2 years experience, you have a perspective, and then that also enriches your experience as a postgraduate student. So from that, I would advise, I would suggest that probably it's better to do your master's after you have gained a bit of work experience, because I think in the end it gives you a really good perspective. And if your aim is to look for a job in the international law field after your master's, then I think that will also fit in very well, because then you would already have experience and the skills that Tofunmi was talking about, and then you have your masters. So by the time you're graduating from your masters, you pretty much have you're a full package. You're ready to present yourself to prospective employers. Whereas if you don't have experience, then you have to look for entry-level positions, probably in your home country, because internationally you may not be as competitive as someone who has experience. So I would encourage young people to, first of all, after graduating, to look for a job, get some experience, gain the skills, and then thereafter do your masters. Probably that will place you on a better footing.
Thanks, Tisu. Now we'll talk about internships now. So Toks, this is for you. So there's a popular belief among students that international law internships are hard to come by. So you've interned at the UN International Residual Mechanism for Criminal Tribunals at The Hague for more than a year now. So what was the application process like? And what tips and advice would you give students with little or no experience looking up to take up international internships at international organizations or international courts and tribunals?
The first point is very straightforward. You apply through the UN job system, which is called Inspira. That's the short answer. And when you apply through Inspira, you fill out your profile, you put in all the documents, for example, your proof of your academic qualifications, recommendation letters, transcripts, and other things as well. Basically, that's the short answer. But in terms of how to actually get it, needless to say, it's very competitive. And the reason why, I can't speak for every intern, but I think one thing that helped me when I made my application is the fact that I had a lot of practical experience. And before I got the gig, I was, as you saw in my biography, so to speak, I was assistant to counsel in China Tribunal, which was an international criminal law job that I was doing beforehand. So I did know quite a few things, which were very helpful in terms of how to help me do the job that I was going to do. So it feeds back into my original point, which is that it's very important to have experience in addition to your master's degree, because most of the interns who work in these international organizations, these are people who are they're not too young. Let's put it that way. They're not too young. They've got some life experience. So don't be too eager to try and get into, the UN or ICC like that. Really consider building your portfolio. That's what I would say. So if you don't have experience, what's the first tip? Well, get experience. And one thing you might consider is things like working in an NGO. You might volunteer for a local charity, do some legal research. Lex Lata just talked about some of the fellowship opportunities, things like that. Do it. I don't know anybody who has just graduated from their LLB and gone straight to an internship. I'm not saying it cannot happen, but I don't know it to happen. So do try and build some life experience beforehand. That really is the best advice I can give. So don't rush into it. These opportunities are there. Most people who have a career within the ICC, the UN, blah, 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 they started out as interns. Most people did. So don't feel the need to rush. Try and build local experience and then make your application. That would be my advice.
Thank you, Toks. Thank you so much. So still on internships, some of these international organizations are unpaid. So even if you do get an internship, there's like little or no opportunity to fund for the organizations to fund those internships. So how do you suggest students participate in these internships with little or no funds?
That is a very unfortunate reality that you've referenced, the fact that many of these internships are unpaid. The thing is that you need to be able to secure funding externally. And one thing that some interns have done is they have a system where their countries of origin support them. I know that's not unusual. So perhaps look into your local jurisdiction to see whether there are any type of programs to support practitioners or aspiring practitioners. In my case, I had lots of scholarships, to able to assist me with that. So I was very fortunate. But I know not everybody is like that, and you cannot also work. That's another interesting thing once you're there. So it's very important to try and secure funding. I wish there was a magic remedy that I could propose, but the unfortunate reality is that I don't know of such a remedy, except just try within your local organizations and see whether there's any type of funding you could secure beforehand.
Okay, so look within for opportunities to fund your internships. Great, great. So Tisu, this is for you. So COVID has changed a lot of things in the world. So there are no conferences, no courses, no physical international law events going on in the world. So how can international law enthusiasts, build solid networks they can leverage on during this period? And lastly, do you think virtual internships are also helpful for law students?
Well, since, as you've said, many or most physical events have been moved, either cancelled or moved online, the best way is to join the bandwagon and join events online. And whilst you are attending the event online, you network. Tukumbo talked about networking. The reality is that even though events have been moved online, people are still networking online. It's not a new thing because we've always done that on LinkedIn. So take advantage of the events that are taking place online. And if you've noticed, a good number of the events that are taking place online are now free, whereas if they were held, physically in some place, probably they would have charged a fee, or many people wouldn't have been able to attend because of the logistics involved in flying from one place to another. So I think COVID has presented a unique opportunity to young practitioners and students, in the sense that they'll be able to attend pretty much any event online, from their bedroom, from their living room. In terms of virtual internships, they are valuable. It's just like any other internship. And in this summer, we've seen a number of law firms here in London and in the US moving their summer associate programs online. And that has been counted as work experience. So again, the advantage of a virtual internship is that you don't have to be in London, you don't have to be in The Hague, you don't have to be in New York in order for you to do an internship at an organization in The Hague or in New York or in London or in Paris. You can do it pretty much anywhere, even on the moon. So COVID has presented a really unique opportunity for young practitioners to learn, to gain experience, and to participate in conferences as attendees or even as speakers. So I would urge young people to look at COVID in a really positive advantage of the opportunity that it is presenting.
So making lemonades out of lemons.
Exactly.
Yes. So Tisu, this is your last question. So you studied law in an African country, Malawi. How was it possible to transition into working for an international law firm in London? And how receptive are law firms to foreign qualifications?
Well, I'll start with foreign qualifications in law firms. I think it really varies. For some firms are sort of familiar with qualifications from other or certain foreign countries. So if you have or you hold a qualification from one of those countries, it becomes a bit more easy. And then unfortunately, some countries are not well known. As a result, their qualifications are not that familiar to law firms. If you find yourself in that category, it may be a bit harder because they're just not familiar with with your qualifications. But that said, there are things that you can do to sort of show that although they may not be familiar with your qualifications, but you yourself as a person are a good candidate for a role available at the firm. And one, it's gaining experience, what Tofunmi has talked about, and then two, if you have a master's degree from another well-known university, because I mean, the implication is that there's no way the second well-known university can accept you if your first university is not that good. So if you do these things, and then the other things is, for example, if you publishing, you can publish an article again, and as Tofunmi pointed out, that shows your ability to write, to draft, and to come up with an argument and defend it. And these are the skills that law firms are looking for. So if you find yourself in a situation where your qualifications are not very familiar to international firms, do things that will make you stand out. So they may say that, okay, he is from Republic of Tree, we never heard about it, but he has this, and she has that. Probably she's a good candidate. And then your first part was, the first part of the question, oh, sorry, can you just remind me?
Yeah, so I was asking, how was it possible for you to transition into working in an international law firm? And I think you've answered that already. And you talked about how, yes, and you talked about how receptive international law firms, if you have something to offer, then they would accept you. So you pretty much answered the question.
Yeah, and just to say that I did exactly what I've just said, because I come from Malawi, and not many people know Malawi. It's a small country. I mean, that's the reality, So sometimes I get asked by people, it's like, oh, where you from? Malawi? It's like, oh, is that a city somewhere? It's like, oh, it's a country. So really, it's just a matter of making yourself stand out. So I went to Dundee, and then I went to Harvard Law School. I also did an internship at the International Criminal Court. I did a placement at Allen and Overy. So there's a program called International Lawyers for Africa that allows young African lawyers to do placements at international firms in London, Paris, Dubai, and now Hong Kong. So, when you have these extra things, it gives people confidence that probably you have something to offer. But when all you have is a degree from University of Malawi, it's a good university. It's a really good university. But unfortunately, not many people are familiar with University of Malawi. As a result, people may doubt you. So just to emphasize that if you find yourself in that situation, make sure that you have extras. And these extras, probably I would say that it's not only for those who have graduated from universities that are, or countries that are not well known. I think for every African student who wants to work in the international law field, have something more than your degree, because then you give people the impression that you have something a little bit more to offer.
That was very, very insightful. Thank you, Tisu. So this is the last question because we're almost out of time, and this is for Toks. So the Hague is said to be the home of international law, just as Nuremberg is the center for international criminal law. Would you say relocating there, or perhaps other key cities for international law, would increase one's chances of getting a desired international law job?
So the Hague, or Den Haag, as it's called, it's a lovely city. I work there, but the honest answer is no, and I'll tell you why. Because unless you have a job offer, there's no point going to another city. And let me give you a real life example. I know somebody who's done that. They left their, I don't remember where they're from originally, but they relocated to The Hague, hoping to make it somehow. And they've been working in a hotel for the past 3 years now, still hoping to make, you know, that jump somehow. Now, there's nothing wrong in working in a hotel room. That's not what he wants to do. That's the point. So, but as we've said, you know, there's still different ways that you can gain experience and take advantage of COVID-19, as Tissu has said. You know, try and use this unique opportunity to leverage, you know, opportunities you never had before, networking, the online events, etc. And then take on board everything we've talked about today. You know, build the experience gradually. Don't be in a hurry. And once you feel confident, then make those applications, and also make sure you have the academic credentials to back your application. Then you make the job applications. Otherwise, you may find yourself in The Hague and, you know, selling fish and chips. Again, I like fish and chips, nothing wrong with it, but if that's not what you want to do, then, you know, don't make the jump. Again, you know, it's a very expensive city, so make sure that, you know, you're able to afford, you know, the jump. That's one thing I'll say as well. I know I was not asked this question, but I want to add something in terms of the master's degree question, which Tissu answered. I also support the idea that you should probably work first before you do your master's degree. And a practical consideration is that unless you have a scholarship, masters are very expensive to pursue. So it's also very wise as well to make sure you have money saved up before you do your master's degree as well. So anyway, that's just a final advice that I hope is very helpful to somebody out there.
Yes. Thank you so much, Tisu. Thank you so much, Toks. This was a very amazing session. We've come to the end of the panel. I really learned a lot, and I'm sure the audience can say the same too. So it's time for question and answers. I'll just go into the chat box to see what questions the audience have for us. Just a few minutes, please. Okay. Audience, please, if you have questions, you can put them in the question box now. Okay, I don't see any questions now. I'll wait for 5 seconds and see if any questions come in. Please type your questions in the question box. Okay, it seems our audience don't have any questions. All right. Thank you very much, Toks. Thank you. Okay, I'm seeing a question now. What if this is from Fayinka Abisola. What if my parents can support me? Can I go for a master's degree immediately after my undergrad?
If you can afford it, that's great. But that being said, just to buttress everything that's been said today, a master's degree in and of itself will not help you all the way. What it aims to do is to demonstrate that you have a particular specialism in a field of law, right? But if you don't have the working experience, it's all theory. So go for the master's degree by all means, but make sure that you're also trying to get practical experience, which you can build up from small organizations as well. That's the point that I'm trying to deliver.
Thank you so much.
And if I may
yeah, just, no problem.
I mean, when I was at Harvard Law School, some of my colleagues had very little experience, probably the minimum 2 years experience. And I mean, on top of the 2 years experience, they gained this, LLM from Harvard Law School. But again, that did not really change, the metrics. So as Tofunmi said, experience is quite important because a potential employer will definitely look for you. Say, okay, you have a master's, okay, that's fine, but then let's look at your experience. So even if you have a master's from a really great university, potential employers will always look for your experience. So your experience is very, very important.
Okay, thank you so much, Toks. So there's a similar question. This person, Rehab, is from Cambridge University and is asking, what kind of work experience can we look to gain when these experiences actually require you to have a postgraduate study or have a postgraduate, degree?
Okay, so I think you have to be very imaginative how you go about it. One fact which is not shocking to anybody here is that we have a very competitive environment, all right? And if you cannot get opportunities through official channels, use your charm, all right? Approach people and try and offer some type of assistance. I'll give you a practical example. My very first, actually no, one particular job that I had, I had applied through the official channel and I couldn't get that job at this. I think this was before I'd graduated from university. And what did I do? I attended a lecture of one of the speakers there, and I showed some interest in what she was saying, and then I said, listen, if you ever need some type of research assistance, I'm your man. And that was a channel for me to actually get to work in the organization. So use your imagination, basically. There are many programs you could do, whether it's a virtual internship, whether it's research assistance, whether it's working in a legal clinic, pro bono, etc. There are many things you could do. People always need legal assistance. So just open your eyes and be willing to explore.
Yeah, thank you, Toks. We can't take all the questions, so I'll just ask one final question. And Tisu, I'd like you to answer this. So Courage from AAU Nigeria is asking, I have dreams to work in the UN, but I've been told I must speak 2 foreign languages, including English. How is that a matter of general requirement? Is it something that will increase my chances if I can speak more than one language?
Well, in the international law field, yes. People are always looking for organizations, even law firms. They're always looking for, people with language skills. A good variety of language skills. But that said, not every job will require you to speak in English and French. So if you go, on the UN website, there are some jobs, for example, they'll specify that they're looking for someone who speaks French and English, or just English. So having language skills, a number of language skills, it's good, but it obviously improves your chances, because it means that if you speak English and French, if they're looking for a French speaker, you'll be able to apply for that job. But it's not a bar in itself. As we know, there are thousands, if not millions, of people who only speak one language, for example, English, working for the UN, working for the World Bank. So if you can, to improve your employability, as Tofunmi said, the international law field is very competitive. So if you would want, as a way of improving or enhancing your employability, you can take up, some lessons, French, Arabic, or Spanish, for example, when it comes to working in law firms in the US. They'll usually look for someone who can speak or draft in Spanish. So do that. That will obviously be a plus, but it's not a bar in itself.
Wow, thank you so much. Thank you, Toks. Thank you, Toks. Thank you, Tisu. We've come to the end of this session. It was really insightful. I'm sorry we could not take all the questions that the audience have put in the chat box, but I'm sure that with this little session, the other questions they have been answered in some way, and the slides that Toks prepared have been sent to the audience, and I'm sure most of the questions have been answered there. This was truly amazing. Thank you for participating, the audience, and thank you for granting this opportunity, Toks and Tisu, to speak to us. So once again, thank you very much.
Thank
We'll
you.
be moving straight to the corporate law session. So please stay tuned. Once again, I'm Jewel Olano.